All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back. Tonight, sitting back with me, I got Alex Easby, who's originally from the UK and is now based here in Austin, Texas. Alex's entire career has been devoted to helping people into their highest potential. He spent the past 2 decades building a bank of tools and knowledge to help people clear out what's getting in their way, inviting in a deeper sense of self-awareness and autonomy. We can't change what we can't see, and we can't see what we can't feel, and that's what Alex is here for. Working with high-performing teams and individuals across businesses, sport, and healthcare, Alex helps people build the practical and emotional resource to thrive personally and professionally. Using a variety of tools, including breathwork, visualization, he guides clients to a deeper understanding of their inner and outer worlds aimed at deep personal and emotional fulfillment. Alex has spoken internationally on the topics of leadership, corporate health, high performance, and stress management, and is the founder of the Edge app, a mobile platform helping high performers win the mental game. Alex, thank you for being here. Welcome to your episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
very grateful to be here. I was just thinking that's a really wordy intro, and then I wrote that intro, so I apologize for that. Made you say way too much for the intro.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's all relevant. You know, mine. If it makes you feel better, I wrote one too, and it was almost just as long, if not longer.
Okay,
so yours was maybe an
Makes
improvement.
me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, maybe you could plug it into ChatGPT and say, shorten this thing down.
Yeah, I think that's what I need to do with everything. Pretty much.
Yeah.
I think if I could just have ChatGPT on a quick link somewhere just to shorten my general speaking or writing or whatever, I think that would be quite effective.
Yeah. Well, I have an icebreaker for you before we dive into things.
Ooh, okay.
It's an easy one, I think.
You didn't tell me this.
It's a surprise.
Okay.
You did something that absolutely terrifies me.
Ooh.
You've swam with sharks.
Yes, I have.
Why did you? What prompted you to become is it a licensed scuba diver? What's the?
Yeah, I've done my open water scuba license. Yeah.
Hey Thad, I was gonna say, do you mind? He will not bite. Do you mind grabbing that from him?
100%.
He's the kind.
Are you sure he doesn't bite?
I'm positive.
You promised me.
Yeah.
We didn't sign a waiver, so I'm hoping
You did sign a waiver. Actually.
Oh shit!
It said in that clause, if dog bites you, you cannot litigate.
Here we go. You got it.
Sorry, buddy.
Thinks we're trying to play.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. We can play afterwards.
We'll give it back to you.
Definitely play
in
afterwards.
about 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But for now, it's going to go somewhere else.
Oh, I can't look him in the eye now. Taking his toy away.
From such a sweet dog.
I know.
How could
it's
you?
just. Oh, you asked me to, so I.
Usually it's my job, but he sat next to you today. Maybe he's
There
mad
we
at
go.
me, or
Yeah. Well, he's mad at me now, so.
now
yeah.
he's just mad at both of us. But what was there any fear behind like getting into the water, knowing there were going to be sharks in there, or was that?
Yeah, so much. That's why I did it. Ultimately, I'd been afraid of sharks since I was a kid, and I was telling a friend about this the other day. I don't know if you had the same thing, but I was a pretty competitive swimmer up until sort of kind of mid-teenage years. But I would have this deep fear that a shark would come through the filter grate of the swimming pool. This would be my cardinal fear as a kid, 100%. That any swimming pool I was in, that some great white shark was just going to burst through this filter grate of the swimming pool. So that had been there since I was pretty young. And I watched Jaws, or at least tried to watch Jaws, got about halfway through it and had to turn it off. So it had got to this point in my life where, and I'm such a monumental fan of the ocean, and just there's so much beauty there. There's so much to be experienced there. And I'd seen a few friends' photographs and videos of their experiences with scuba diving and just what they see down there and just the experiences they'd had. I'm like, I can't let this fear that came from childhood, mostly from childhood cartoons, dictate how much experience I'm able to give myself as an adult. So the opportunity came up, and yeah, I've done it maybe 3 times now. So I've been down there with grey tips, white tips, hammerheads, bull sharks, tiger sharks. Never seen a great white. But yeah, some pretty scary creatures, and it was the most stunning, beautiful, incredible experience of my life. Brilliant. And they couldn't have given 2 hoots that I was down there. You know, you just think, oh, they're going to keep coming up and just testing me, etc. See what my fingers taste like, and they do not care. They're in their own world, they're doing their own thing, and they're the most majestic, beautiful creatures I've ever seen. Just incredible.
Huh.
So it transformed. You know, now I think of sharks in a completely different way, obviously, and have such a beautiful experience with them. And I think it's beautiful how we can just alchemize that fear into something ultimately beautiful in terms of that experience.
Yeah, I had a similar fear as a kid where we had one of those above ground pools in our backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the most irrational fear on planet Earth.
Yeah.
The shark's just going to drop out of the sky.
Yeah. There could be a 15-foot great white,
Right.
great white coming through this wall. Yeah, I mean, that's the imagination of childhood, right? It's such an incredible thing, but it's also patently terrifying at the same time.
But then even as an adult, we had a lake that we swam in, and the lake was fairly big. I can't give you dimensions or gallons or anything, but the water's pretty murky, so you can't see what's below you. And even as an adult, I'd be out there at 20, 21, 22 years old, and we'd be riding around in the boat, and when we would anchor and swim in the water for a few minutes, I would be 90% having fun, 10% thinking, am I going to die?
100%. And it was, yeah, I've done a lot of swimming in Europe, off the coast of France and Spain, Italy and stuff. We went on vacation when I was a kid, Greece, places like that. Places where you know there are not great white sharks, there are not tiger sharks, there are not bull sharks. Maybe some little ones here and there, but you know intellectually that you should be okay. Like 99.99999% recurring, you're fine. But the intellectual gets tossed out of the window when the nervous system doesn't feel safe. And that's ultimately what it was, is you've got this vast expanse of, whether it's a lake or an ocean, just beneath you that you cannot see through. So you don't know.
Right.
Your body doesn't know. And it's always going to help you protect yourself. So yes, in terms of survival instinct, it probably makes good sense not to be in that vast expanse of water. But then how do you, and that was really fascinating with the open water swimming, was how do you settle yourself? How do you settle your nervous system in order to have this experience, so that your experience is not one of just abject fear. Your experience is one of, oh, I can actually enjoy this. And that was something with the scuba diving was, I'm a relatively big guy. I'm sort of 6'4". I'm not a small person, so I consume quite a lot of oxygen. And I was down there with the tanks, and it was my first kind of dives, and you're getting used to the whole kind of mechanics of the breathing with the tank on and the mouthpiece and everything else. And I just noticed that I was going through the air really quickly because I was breathing so fast, because my heart rate was going. And so it became, in an effort to calm myself down, it became, you know what, it wasn't even that, sorry. It wasn't an effort to calm myself down. It was an effort to prolong my experience. Because I was going to have to go up maybe half an hour, 30 minutes before everyone else, because I was running out of air.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I want to be down here. I want more of this experience. So I'm going to have to calm myself down if I want more of this experience. And I thought that was such a beautiful kind of metaphor for life. It's like, what do I want my experience to be? Therefore, can I learn and practice the tools that are going to help me improve that experience? So it was very much an effort for me to stay down there longer that drove my desire to kind of work on my breathing and to slow everything down and actually just be calmer, be more comfortable down there.
So is that fear eradicated now? Like, could you jump into any body of water, and even if you do or don't know there could be a shark in there that is a bit more aggressive, can you enjoy swimming or scuba diving with a lot more peace than you could before? Or is that subtle thought still lingering in there?
It's a really good question. I don't think I've really considered it. But I have swum in open water a decent amount since then, both in the UK and in the US and sort of Central America. And the one thing I'll notice is my mind does not automatically go there. It doesn't automatically go to that almost sort of coded nervous system fear of, what if there's a shark in here? It just doesn't go to that place, whereas it did before. And I'm not entirely sure what the difference there is. Maybe the difference is just knowing how disinterested the sharks were in me. They just literally couldn't have given a hoot. They were so interested in their own thing. And actually the diving instructor that I had for my license was very, very helpful with that. He was a French guy. His name was Axel. Really amazing human being, beautiful, beautiful human being. And the one thing he said to me was just, you are a dumb decision for a shark. You're a really dumb decision. You're way too big. You're way too noisy. You're just too much of a bother. Sharks are going to want things that is a relatively dead cert that they can eat the whole thing, unless there's a pack of them, or I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but if there's more than one. But they rarely hunt in groups, so they're going to look for the easy feeds, and you are not an easy feed. You are going to be, they've lived for however many millions and millions of years. They're extremely smart. They know what to go after. They know what not to go after. And you've got this big old loud tank on your back. They can probably hear your heartbeat just running 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you're just too big. They're just not interested. So that made a lot of sense to me. So I think that part of it definitely kind of settled my nervous system. But I think and you asked me the question then, and I've never really thought about it since, which tells me that it's not an intellectual thing anymore, that I'm not afraid of being in the water, the open water, that it's actually a nervous system thing. I'm just more comfortable that I've done that. I've kind of flooded myself in that way. And my nervous system knows that, yes, there's always going to be an inherent risk for sure. There's never no risk of being in open water, but it knows that the risk is a lot lighter, I suppose.
The very first time I went skydiving, the tandem, which is the guy on your back that pulls the parachute, he told me that the only thing I need to be afraid of is at the very end, when we're getting ready to land, I need to lift my feet up as high as possible, turning my body into an L shape, because we're landing in a field with gopher holes, and if my foot gets caught in one of those, it'll rip it off at the ankle.
Could they not have chosen a different field? Especially
considering the part of California we're in. I'm like, we have thousands of acres of fields, and we're going to land over the gopher field. He also took a giant rip off a bong right before we went up. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
Maybe I don't know. But so the first time I went, there is definitely a ton of fear. Never had been so, and it was a different kind of fear. It wasn't an anxious, like, oh, I'm in trouble with my parents. It was like a different fear that I've never felt before. Ultimately had a ton of fun. Dove 5 more times after that. And then on the 7th time I went, the anxiety came back, and it was almost like am I playing with fire here? Is this one of those things where I've dove 6 times, I had some fun, why am I going to 7th? I don't need this again. Haven't gone since. I do want to go one more time, because I haven't gone in Texas, and I have 2 other buddies that have never been, and we found a hangar in San Marcos that does jump, so I know I'm going to go at least one more time. But yeah, man, fear is an interesting topic.
The fear definitely transmuted. I remember, just as you were talking then, it brought up a memory of, I think, the sort of second or third to last time that I dove. Was out in Fiji in 2019, and it had nothing to do with sharks. It had everything to do with the weather. And we'd just gone out on a fairly standard morning, and the weather had been great up until that point, and I had a dive booked in, and I've never seen weather like it. Just the storm clouds rolling in, the ferocity of the rain, the thunderclaps, everything. It was just so, if you'd been indoors, you'd sit there watching it for hours, and it would just been the most beautiful kind of romantic thing. But being out on it, and I remember doing that thing that I remember doing as a kid playing rugby, when the weather was awful. You'd be like, is the game going to be still on? Are you sure it's going to be still on? Like, kind of hoping it wouldn't be. But then you get out there and it's actually fine, and you just have a great time anyway. And it was a similar kind of thing, because I was still relatively new to diving. I'd done maybe 20 dives at that point, so I was still pretty new. I was like, are you sure it's safe to go out? And this guy, the captain of the boat, was like, yeah, of course, you're going to be fine. This guy's done like 20, 30 years of diving and boat work. He's like, oh my God, this is nothing. Like, okay, all right. Well, I'm going to blindly trust you, this man that I've never met before in my entire life. So we'll just go for it. And we went out and we dove, and that was uncomfortable. Kind of, falling into the ocean backwards off the boat, just wind swirling, the rain just torrential, thunderstorm going on around you, and you're just falling back into these waves, and the boat is all over the place. And I don't do well with motion sickness anyway, but so I was kind of grateful to be off the boat, but just falling backwards into that and seeing, part of me was thinking, oh, it's going to be better underneath though. It's going to be better under the water. It's going to be calmer, blah, blah. It was not. We were just being pulled all over the place, back and forth, and you're just kind of in the swell of the water, and it was difficult, but I got out, and I remember just thinking, wow, if you can do that and retain or just maintain any kind of level of composure, that's incredible. That's testing your mentality, that's testing your physicality. Can you slow your breath down when you genuinely feel at risk for drowning? And I think that's why drowning is one of those cardinal fears of human beings, because we are absolutely out of our power under the water. And I did speaking of fear, I went out somewhere, it was here in Austin, I don't remember the name of the swimming baths, but the company that runs it is a company called Deep End Fitness. And Deep End Fitness Austin, and they run basically fitness, health training, but underwater. So you're focused on breath holding, you're focused on working on your kind of CO2 tolerance, your VO2 max, all of this kind of stuff. And a lot of us are used to working out above land, but what happens when you're under the water? What happens when you're tested in that way? And it just brings a different level of focus, definitely a different level of panic for sure. That was tough, but I think just doing those things and putting yourself in those positions with coaching, with training, with the safety kind of parameters that you need around those things, you need to be coached, you need to be guided with those things. If you have that in place, going for those kind of things and really learning what your body does in panic, what your mind does in panic, where it goes, how to divert it away from panic and towards, a sense of calm. And so much of that, especially where water is involved, and it's a beautiful metaphor for psychology, right, in terms of the depth of water, and that's such an enduring metaphor throughout kind of psychological or psychology writing. Think about Carl Jung and plenty of other psychologists using depth, using the ocean as the metaphor for the psyche, the chaos of the darkness, and then understanding where we go when we get into that darkness, whether it's in water or whether it's in difficult times of our lives, whether it's in moments where we're fronted and faced with our own shadow. Where do you go? Do you panic, or do you create safety within your own nervous system to allow yourself to look at those things with compassion, with love, and just slow yourself down? So it's ultimately helping us to respond to threat, perceived threat, fear, in a way that helps us grow rather than shrink.
I'll give you a real life example of that. Yesterday, I was invited to an event where I knew outside of the person who invited me, I wasn't going to know anybody else in the room. And part of the reason I said yes is because I thought this is going to be good for me.
100%.
It's sort of like the thing with the sharks. This
yes.
will be good for me. I'm only 18 months in Austin, so I'm very much still proactively trying to figure out who is my inner circle, who's my outer circle, adding people to that, not as a numbers game, but just because I don't like to be lonely. Or even my mind even went to, I could find a couple guests for the podcast, so that would make my life a lot easier
100%,
if I find a few people. And so I show up to this particular event, and I saw my friend, so I said hi to him first, and then I grabbed a drink, saw a group of 3 guys talking, and so I just walked over and said, hey, could I crash your guys' conversation for a few minutes? And they said yes. And then one other guy came over, and he knew the 3 individuals I was talking to, and the comment he said was like, I think he said something like, oh, you guys just being a bunch of gays over here in the corner. And it was as a gay man, I immediately sort of shrunk a little bit because I thought, did I just step into an environment where the people, for lack of a better term, are like super straight? And so throughout the event,
Also very bigoted to say something like that.
right?
Not just straight, but bigoted.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so as I was going through the event, I talked with almost everybody there. It wasn't a large group, 40, maybe 50 people, if that. But I connected with almost everyone, but I did notice that immediately my guard went up, which I've been out of the closet for over a decade now. But there is something about that comment where it almost made me feel like I was a kid in high school being made fun of again.
100%.
And I realized that in this room, it could be a risk to be my full self. And immediately my mind went to, if someone asked me like, oh, do I have a girlfriend? How am I going to answer that? Because I already have this pre-made assumption about this guy based off this one sentence he just said. And I felt like the entire time I was hiding that portion of my identity. And so it was a hard event to navigate that I found myself wanting to leave as quickly as I could, because I just thought this is a group of people I will not be able to connect with. I need to get back to Third Eye Lounge and do some breath work or something. But I don't know. So if you could have been like a coach on my shoulder in that moment, and you sense that I had that that instant rush of sort of anxiety and fear about what kind of identity can I reveal and not reveal about myself, what would you have told me in that moment, do you think?
That's a really good question. First of all, I'm sorry you had that experience.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's not okay though, is it?
It's not. No, you're right.
It's one of those things that you just think, okay, this person has come in, whatever his intention was with saying that, he has, I suppose he's made it clear that his opinion is that to be gay is not the acceptable thing in that moment. Like, he's used it as a derogatory term. So, of course, that's going to feel awful. That's going to feel like, yes, of course, you can't be yourself because there is something, at least this one person has made it, even in a jokey way, clear of his opinion, even if he is joking. So yes, 100%, our cardinal fear as human beings is to be rejected or abandoned by the tribe.
Right.
So in that moment, you've had that very real and I'm sure very painful kind of at least question of, does everybody else feel that way here? Of course your mind is going to go there. So I'm not going to, you asked me about, if I was to coach you in that moment, I don't think your mind went anywhere that no one else's mind would. I think it makes sense that your mind goes to those places, 100%. How wouldn't it in that kind of moment?
Right.
I wonder if there's an opportunity there. I don't know. It's a tricky one because there's a part of me that thinks, well, I now have this subconscious opinion that everyone else here might have that same opinion or might feel that same way. So you could gamify it in some kind of way, in the sense of, well, let me try and disprove that. Let me give people the benefit of the doubt and just go around and have conversations. And if it goes that way, it goes that way. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But let me not assume. But that, I hope that doesn't feel like it's discounting your original response, because I think your original response is very human, to feel that threat. So, I mean, on the one hand, I think it's very normal to think, I'm just going to leave and go somewhere I do feel comfortable. But then, maybe it's the same as the shark experience or the skydiving experience of like, okay, well, you know what? Let me test it. Let me test it and see if it is. And if I get, maybe make a bargain with yourself there. If I get one more of those kind of comments, then I'm done. Like, this isn't the place for me. I don't know. How does that sit with you?
I don't feel like you discounted the experience at all. I think my follow-up question would be, before I could answer, how does that sit with me? Everyone in the audience struggles with their identity in some way, whether there's someone listening right now who's in high school and they don't even know, like, who am I? I have these titles of, okay, I'm a football player and I, go to church on the weekends because my parents told me to. But I think for, all of us, have these moments where someone says something to us, whether they're being serious or joking, like you said, and it's sort of a jab at who we think we are or who we're trying to be. So I think my follow-up question for you, and to try to bring the audience into the conversation as well, is, as you've been coaching your clients or even just observing the lives of people in your inner circle, are we going to get to the point where we can sort of not have that kind of comment come your way and still be able to go through the rest of the event with confidence? Not to say my confidence took a huge shot. You know, I still had several pleasant conversations, overall grateful I went to the event. But I guess the question is sort of like, you know, how do we navigate being how do we show up authentically and build that resilience, knowing that everyone is not going to like us, me, and I'm not going to like everyone that I meet, but I can still show up in life authentically and with confidence. How do we build up to that point?
It's a really good question. I think one of the first things that comes to mind there is knowing that 99.9% of anything that anybody's going to say to you is a projection of how they feel about themselves. I think that's really helpful, and I notice that's helpful for me. I notice that's very helpful for clients, because it takes it out of this realm of being personal. It's like, oh, you're throwing a lot of your stuff onto me and kind of projecting that it's mine, and I actually know it's yours because you don't know me. And even if the person does know you, you know, so much of what is thrown at us is mostly a projection of how the other person feels about themselves. So I think, you know, it's very easy then to say, well, then I pity that person. It's like, well, it's not necessarily about pity. It's just about knowing that it has nothing to do with you. I think that's really helpful to know. And you know, we there's this quote going around that, you know, we spend so much time thinking about what other people think of us. We do a lot less of that if we realize that people are only ever thinking about themselves. And I think that's said in sometimes a bit of a sharp tone, but you know, I think it's very normal that we think about ourselves. I don't think it necessarily means anything bad. I just think it's helpful to recognize that for the most part, people aren't thinking about us as much as we probably think they are. And that a lot of the things that do come our way are mostly a projection of how that person feels about themselves. So I think that's very important to recognize, but also to your kind of second question there around how do we get to that place? I think ultimately, and this is the scary part, and I'm not going to say any of this is easy. This is where the fear absolutely is. And I've only found this really kind of come through with age and a lot of self-work is the more honest you can be in any given situation, the more naturally the people that tend to gravitate to you are your people. Like you don't get any people that are not supposed to be there. You don't get any people that, I don't really jive with this person and we just never really kind of seen eye to eye. No, they just wouldn't be there because you are 100% you. And even if they're not 100% them, there just isn't that same kind of resonance. And you're just not going to kind of gravitate towards each other. So I think that's, and again, it's so much easier said than done for sure. But the braver and more courageous we can be, and that definitely starts with the nervous system. You mentioned breath work there. Third eye, and it definitely starts with the nervous system in terms of creating that safety within ourselves. It's very easy to say, well, just be more confident. Well, just be okay with people making dumb comments, or be okay with, you know, whatever it might be. We can tell ourselves that intellectually all day long, but if we're not working on the nervous system through things like breath work, etc., yoga, other things as well, if we're not really kind of doing that conditioning work with the nervous system, we're never going to feel safe in the moment anyway. So this is where I think there's a really beautiful kind of relationship between the physiological and the psychological and the emotional, where one informs the other. And if in any given situation we can feel more somatically, nervous system wise, physically safe in our environment within ourselves, then we're much more able to kind of see those situations as an opportunity to, well, I have no desire to be around you because I'm completely 100% safe comfortable with who I am as a human being and within my nervous system. So, I think as a reframe there, it's like, potentially just, oh, awesome. One other person that is kind of getting me closer to, one other person that is not within my circle that is getting me closer to having people within my circle that I want to be there. So I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but I think coming back to that point of most of it is projection, and the more courageous we can be with just being open about who we are, and I think that starts with the nervous system, the more aligned our circle is going to be with actually what we want it to be and who we want to be in it.
I've asked a lot of people this question. I've never got that answer before. So you've given me something to think about.
What comes up for you when I say that?
I need to do more breath work. It's a very simple response. But I have, one of the reasons I went to that class is, again, to trying to say yes to more things is when I moved to Austin, I thought part of the reason for the move is I want to get out of my comfort zone. So when people invite me to breath work and, my initial response, I don't know if this comes from my parents, the town I grew up in. My initial response is like, that's very woo-woo and a waste of my time, And then I went. So this is how Alex and I met, first of all. So here in Austin, it's called Third Eye, what's the rest of it? Meditation?
Third Eye Meditation Lounge. I think that's that's the full term. Don't remember.
And so in case you haven't heard of breathwork, the way I would describe it as a one-time goer is that I was under the impression that we were going to be doing a lot of different deep breathing patterns, and that it was just going to be very calming. And the way it was pitched to me, I just thought, sure, yeah, let's do it. I'll go. And my friend that wanted to do it, he said, I'll go with you, which made it 10 times easier as well when you can go with a buddy. So we show up, and Alex is there, and he says that this was the curveball that I was not expecting. And it was, I'll just preface this by saying it was one of the most beautiful 15, 20 minutes of my time here in Austin so far, however long it lasted.
Felt like longer than 15 minutes, I guarantee that.
That whole hour and a half, my concept of time was out the window. So even when JJ ended the class, I was like, I think I know that was an hour and a half, but I didn't know if we were at minute 45 or minute hour and 20. But because you could describe this so much better, how did we kick off that particular breathwork class?
So let me first say that was not a typical breathwork class. So you really kind of threw yourself into the fire with that one.
Excellent.
Yeah, as did I think pretty much 99% of the people in that class, because no one really had a sense of what was coming, which is beautiful and also terrifying. So what we started off that class with, so JJ, who taught the class, is a good friend of mine, and he's an excellent breathwork facilitator, a lot of experience, and just very, very good at guiding people through that. And him and I had a conversation about doing something together, and he asked me what I'd want to do, and I said, well, a big thing for me right now with client work and just with the way that I'm thinking and experiencing the world, connection means more to me now than I think it ever has. And I think is a more important concept in humanity than I think it ever has been. So we led with an exercise where we got everybody up and walking around the room, and they were to start walking very quickly. So you were all as a group, and there was maybe 20, 30 people in the group, something like that. So you're walking around a fairly big space, and I guided you to walk around that space with your eyes down to the floor. And you're walking around quickly, you're kind of meandering between each other and avoiding contact and all this kind of stuff, all the while your eyes are at the ground. So we're mimicking this kind of very city lifestyle, buzzing around, over-caffeinated, just no eye contact, all of this kind of stuff. So you do that for a couple of minutes, and then we got into basically slowing down the walking, and you start to lift your gaze. And here and there you're making bits of eye contact with people that are walking around. And I guide you to just hold that gaze as you're walking by someone, not for any specific amount of time, but just to connect eye to eye with the next person you walk by, and you keep doing that. We slow down the walking. And you're making slightly longer eye contact. And then at one point I asked you to stop walking and find yourself just in front of one other person within the group. So you kind of find that, you figure that out, and you're there faced with one other human being who you've likely never met before. And I guided you with that as well. If you know other people, then try and avoid doing this with them. Just get you in front of new people. So you stood maybe a foot or two, maybe a foot away from another person, and the guidance is just to stay in eye contact, to stay eye to eye. And while you're doing that, I'm reading off, we did this 3 times, reading off certain scripts about how you're interacting with this person. There's no speaking, so it's all just eye contact, and really kind of seeing this person as a person that's been through pain, as a person that's been through challenging moments, as a person that's been through immeasurable things that we couldn't even imagine, and just to have compassion for this person's journey, and to really sit with that and to maintain eye contact for the whole time, and really kind of see into that person that we've never met before. And that lasts maybe, while I'm reading the script, while you're eye to eye, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but then when you're staring into the eyes of someone you've never met before, or anyone for that matter, for 2 to 3 minutes straight, it's an interesting experience. And then we break off and we carry on walking, and we do that again. And then it's the prompt, if I'm not wrong, was about this person has dreams, this person has aspirations, this person has things that they've been extremely brave at and courageous at in their lifetime, and we'll never know what those are, but just know that this person is full of strength and love and gratitude and courage. And again, it's another 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll do one more. And the last one, which gets me a bit of a lump in the throat every time I think about it, is to see the child in this person.
Same here. Yeah.
To see the child that was full of energy and excitement and aspiration and desire and just excitement about life. To see that child that also went through pain. To see that child that has persisted, that's been resilient to get to this place at this time as a 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old human being. To see the immense strength of that child and what they had to go through. And yeah, it was even for me as guiding it, and I've been through it as a participant before, and it's an extremely emotional, connecting experience. And ultimately, it's something that we don't do very often. It's a way that we don't really very often connect, and I think it's a very important thing for us to be able to do. Now, perhaps more than ever, with social media and technology kind of dominating our lives, can we slow down? Can we slow down and have these moments where we're looking this person in the eye, and we can have compassion for who this person is, who this person was, and who this person will be? And it's something that just came to me then was, it's such a beautiful exercise for many different reasons, but one of those reasons is to notice, which is another reason why I ask people to do it facing someone that they've never spoken to before or never met before, is you literally have no idea about any aspect of that person's life. So what meaning are you giving to that person? We come back to projection again. How are you projecting meaning? How are you projecting information into that person's eyes, knowing you don't know them? You don't know anything about their history. You don't know anything about their life. So when we consider what meaning I'm putting into that person's eyes, am I reading that their eyes are sad? Am I reading that they're happy? Am I reading that they're angry? Am I reading that they've been through immeasurable pain and difficulty? That's about me. It's not about the other person. It's a reflection of how I'm feeling about myself in my current situation. So it gives us immeasurable data points and information for which to really kind of see where we're at and to dig a little deeper into those things. So that's what I subjected you to.
It was beautiful. It was, I got a little emotional just listening to you describe what it was, but I would say, yeah, if you have that opportunity, I definitely want to run from it. Your gut is going to tell you that sounds uncomfortable, but if you can show up you're not going to die. So there's that.
No, hopefully not.
Your worst case scenario is you're going to feel a little bit awkward. But like you mentioned with the sharks and whatnot, putting yourself in those situations, the growth that you could get from that is astronomical. One thing that also just happened yesterday was I went to a gym that I don't normally go to for convenience sake. And when I walked through the front door, there's probably about 8 steps from the door to the front desk. And the young man that was working the front desk was originally looking at the computer. And then once I got maybe 1 or 2 steps in, I was already staring directly at him because I love making eye contact with people. And so he looks over and sees that I'm making eye contact with him. And without saying a thing for about 4 or 5 seconds, we just stared at each other while I was walking up to the desk. And then I looked down to scan my card. And as my eyes came back up, I was looking for his name tag. And he said, "Have a good workout." And I said, "Thanks, Kate. Hope you have an awesome day." And this kid got the biggest smile on his face. And this is hopefully a good segue into connection, which is one of the things we wanted to talk about today. Is in my head, if I had to guess, this guy was probably somewhere between like 18 and 22 years old. And maybe I'm just overthinking this, but as I was working out for the first 10 minutes of my workout, give or take, I thought, what is it about making eye contact, using his name, and telling him to have an awesome day that this kid went from whatever state he was in to he lit up like when these lights turned on right before the podcast started. I sensed like a shift in his energy, like it was the best part of his day. And all I did was acknowledge his existence. Your thoughts?
I have so many. I also love that you offered him that experience.
It was awesome.
That you very consciously offered him that experience because it's so beautiful. I think just connecting in that way, and what I love about that is the way you tell it, which is great. What comes to me is it was a very natural response for him. It wasn't like you just gave him a gift, like a physical gift or something like that. It was like, "Oh, thank you." It was literally just eye contact, hearing his name, acknowledging his existence and being with him in that moment. Very organically and naturally, just that was his response. And that's going to be 99% of people's responses. Maybe some people will be a bit freaked out because they're just not used to it at this point. Who knows? But I think for the most part, we connect to that in such a deep way. And I think about it, there's a few things that come to mind. And eye contact is a very important thing from a very kind of primal perspective, because if you look at most animals, dogs, you've got a picture of some wolves up there, similar kind of thing. I can't remember what it's called, so I'm going to butcher it, but the whites around the eyes, they have mostly filled in eyes. The eye contact would have been, for the human species for millions of years, the best way for us to communicate when words were not possible. So if you think you're in the rainforest or wherever and you're hunting, or you're trying not to get eaten by a leopard or something like that, so you're not going to call out by word. You're going to use your eyes. Which way should we go? And the reason we have such big whites around the eyes is that we can see when the pupil moves, we can very clearly see which direction it's moving in. So we're communicating information about which way we should go. Or the tiger's over there, I can't tell you by words. Look over there. Please look over there.
Right.
So it's an extremely important thing. So I think it fascinates me to think that, why is eye contact so natural for us to do? Because it kept us alive for millions of years. And you know what it feels like. I think we all know what it feels like when someone resists making eye contact with you. There's a break in trust there. There is a sense of, this person isn't willing to connect with me. They're hiding something. What is that? And I remember that very vividly from my experiences growing up, specifically with my dad. Him and I didn't have the best of relationships, and I found it very difficult to make eye contact with him. And he found it, I experienced it as he found it difficult to make eye contact with me. Whereas it's something that I enjoy very much and I'm very kind of focused on, not in a kind of creepy way, but
Right.
just, I think it's very important. So I noticed that about myself as a kind of a kid and a teenager. And ultimately I didn't feel like I never really felt completely emotionally or physically supported by my dad. And I think a lot of it came from this sense of, I didn't really trust him in some ways. I'm not saying purely because of the eye contact, and he had some other things going on. But there was that disconnect there that never really kind of made me feel like I wanted to make eye contact with him. So it very much can fracture relationships because it is such a primal, organic, natural response for us as human beings to really sit with that eye contact. It ingratiates us to each other. It communicates trust. It communicates any number of things that I think are extremely important. And I think I don't know this for a fact, but it wouldn't surprise me if, we get a lot of oxytocin through physical contact and affection and things like that. And I think we do get a release of it from eye contact too, because it is that, again, that first point of contact with connecting with another human being. So it's awesome that you gave him that. That's really cool.
It was such a cool moment. It made me want to go back to that gym.
Yeah, 100%.
Because a part of me, whether it's the podcaster in me, whether it's the side of me where the whole reason I have the podcast is because I want to help people. I want to know more. I want to almost like sit down with them and be like, why? I don't know if you remember me from last week, but why did you light up like that? Why, or did I read the room wrong? Or, I don't think I did, but just give him that out if he wants it. And I probably won't be that direct with a stranger, but if I go back to that gym several more times over the course of the next couple months and we have sort of those forced interactions in a way, maybe I can get that out of him one day, but we'll see what happens.
I'd be really curious to know. And I kind of hope that his response would be, I don't really know why it felt good, because then it's like, oh no, this is just an innate, organic, inbuilt thing about being a human that we enjoy.
Yeah.
I hope you do go back there, and I hope he had no idea why he was smiling from ear to ear.
Yeah.
It's just because,
So when you, is there any particular, we'll come back to connection in a couple seconds, but I wanted to sort of lay the groundwork as we're 47 minutes in. Is there any particular group that you hope to speak to today that you really hope listens into this episode?
Wow, good question. I suppose there isn't a specific group that comes to mind. I think it's more of a general sense of people who are feeling, I suppose, disconnected, people who are perhaps feeling lonely, people who are perhaps feeling like they don't have people or a community that helps them feel heard. I think it's maybe people that feel slightly, I suppose, disconnected from where we currently are, or at least feel that something needs to change, because I think a lot does need to change. And I think connection and community is at the heart of what that change needs to be ultimately. So I think if I was to speak to anybody, it would be the people that feel like they want more out of their friendships, they want more out of their relationships, they want more out of this experience of life as a human being, as a connected, interconnected human being. And I think a lot of that comes from first connecting with yourself in a deeper way, obviously with things like breathwork, etc. And the more we do that, I think the more it opens us up to connecting with other people in very beautiful and powerful ways. And I suppose I always remember hearing this advice in terms of writing or in terms of putting any kind of programs together or even coaching in certain ways, is you're always trying to speak to the person that you were maybe 3 years ago. What problems were you having then? What challenges were you coming up against? What are the things in your reality at that particular moment in time that you really felt like you needed to work on? And for me, I come back to, so I haven't been in Austin long either. I got to Austin November 2023 last year. And I got here extremely anxious. I got here very anxious. I got here very, I guess, sort of somatically, physiologically activated or frustrated. And I wasn't feeling good in my own skin at all. And I remember something came up for me around a breathwork event that was going on at Casa de Luz, which is where Third Eye is. And this was maybe about a week after I'd arrived in Austin, and this was on a Sunday. And it was a big kind of group event, and it was a one-off event. So, with those kind of events, you're going to have to introduce yourself, you're going to have to say a little bit about yourself. And I get really embarrassed talking about this, but I think it's really important. And I'm working on my central nervous system safety, so I feel comfortable saying it. And especially with you make me feel very comfortable saying what I feel like I need to say. So I got to that Sunday morning, and I couldn't go. I felt so anxious. I felt my body was just rejecting it. I was terrified of the thought of, in that moment, speaking about myself, introducing myself in that group setting, and I didn't go. And the rest of that day was full of shame, was full of regret, was full of self-flagellating words, a lot of negative self-talk, and probably a massive Cheesecake Factory order. So it wasn't a great rest of that Sunday. I kind of vowed in that moment, amidst the sort of shame, etc., that this isn't who I want to be. I don't want to be this person that backs away from these things. And this was maybe 3 years after going and diving with the sharks. So it's, it's definitely a process. And I would say, if anything, the fear, a lot of my fear, which I recognize now, I'm going to come back around to this. I feel like I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but a lot of my fear since I was a kid has been elements of social anxiety, and really kind of painting myself with the brush of being a deep introvert. And I'll come back to my dad, because he's been a very big influence on a lot of these things, not in the way that you might think. I said our relationship was difficult. He died earlier this year, in early March this year. And I've been doing a lot of work around my relationship with him, around my relationship with the masculine, with what that even means. And one of the things that I noticed in really kind of going through a lot of that kind of stuff back end of last year was, you mentioned before the term identity. I had got myself into this identity of being an introvert. I realized it wasn't mine. It wasn't my identity at all. That was his. I thought, because of how I was raised, because of his kind of, example, that it was just safer to be introverted, because he was terrified of speaking to people. He was terrified of social connection. Didn't have any friends. Just very resistant to a lot of those kind of things. So you learn that as a kid. And I realized growing up that I'm like, past sort of maybe 3 years or so, I'm like, oh, no, that's not mine. I need to take that mask off, the introvert mask, because ultimately what it was doing was keeping me safe from being rejected or abandoned by the tribe. There was some bullying in high school as well, which contributed to that as well. So that term introvert was, for me anyway, not saying this across the board, but for me personally, wasn't mine to own. And once I let go of that moniker, that label, that identity, everything started to open up. And that Sunday evening when I didn't go to that event was a big moment of that. I'm like, why am I feeling so much shame here? And the reason was that it wasn't mine. That wasn't me. And so then maybe 2 weeks after that, I found out about third eye meditation and breath work, etc. And it was just, I realized then it was just an ongoing thing. It wasn't a particular event that was on. It was just a regular thing that they ran every single day. There were different classes. So I was like, oh, maybe I wouldn't have to introduce myself. I was still thinking through those terms. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go. And that's how I first met JJ. It was a Sunday, 2 weeks after that initial Sunday. met JJ, beautiful human being, wonderful energy, and just so welcoming. You know, you can't not love that guy. And he helped to really kind of bring me in, and he involved me into it because he knew I was interested in it. And so we did this beautiful kind of very intense somatic breathwork session for sort of 90 minutes on a Sunday afternoon. And at the end of that, you know, I just felt like things shifted. It felt like an anxiety, this kind of fizzing in my body had just dissipated. It had gone. And I felt instantly able to connect with myself at a deeper level. And it was just very, very freeing. And I remember I'd gone to a session the following Tuesday, or the Tuesday after, so a day later, 2 days later. And it was a different instructor, a guy called Jake, also very, very good. And we'd gone through a similarly intense breathwork session for an hour. And I remember him saying at the end, look, I would love to hear people's experiences. I would love to hear if anybody has anything to say. Then I'd love to hear from you. And I remember in my intellectual mind running through my head of like, no, I'm not going to say anything. He's given me the option, so I'm just not going to. Why would I? And at the same time, I noticed my right hand was in the air. I'm like, oh, shit, what are you doing up there? You know, like, oh, okay. So he obviously sees my hand raised, and there's all of this intellectual stuff saying, what are you doing? Like, you have no idea what you're about to say. You don't have anything to say. But my body clearly did. And he called on me, and, you know, I just gave, you know, a couple of minutes worth of my experience, and it was very, very profound. My experience was, my words probably weren't. But it was just this experience of just speaking from, for want of a better expression, speaking from the heart, speaking from this very intuitive sense of, this was my experience. I don't need you to agree with it. I don't need you to think it's interesting or whatever, but this was my experience. And it was such a beautiful moment for me personally because of everything that had happened maybe 3 weeks before, and because of knowing that I was taking on this identity of my father's that wasn't and isn't mine, that in that moment it was this awakening kind of process of, no, this is who you are. This is who you are when you're in your flow, when you're in your body, when you're feeling good, when you're able to release this anxiety. You just speak from the heart. And I don't think anything ever, you know, maybe this is too much of a blanket statement, but I think when you're connected to that heart, to that soul, and you're speaking intuitively and speaking organically, that's where love comes from. Love for self first, and then love for everybody else. So I think it was a beautiful process for me of connecting into myself. And I think that's always going to be the conduit to connecting with other people, is how you're feeling within yourself, and do you feel like you're able to speak your truth.
So part of the reason I asked you on, thank you first off for that, the answer to that question. That's a very well articulated story that I enjoyed listening to. Part of the reason I invited you on is because the impression that I got from you at Third Eye was, here is someone who is very confident in their identity and who they are. And so that story almost surprises me that only 3 years ago, you said?
Oh,
was that event?
That was in December 2023. It was like 4 months before.
Oh, that whole story you just told was?
Yeah, that was in December 2023. So it was 3 months before we met.
Wow. So you had that moment. Between then and today, what have you done to capitalize on, if that's the right word, but to continue to figure out, like, actually, I don't like that. Let me rephrase this. On the exterior, you have all these words that define you. You have a degree in business management, marketing, international business, a master's of science. You're a founder, you're a coach. You know, people could say, like, here's David, he's a podcaster, he's this, that, or the other. When you strip away all those external things, who is Alex?
Good question. I'm someone who really enjoys depth. I really like depth, and equally I like play. And And the play part has been more of a difficult thing for me to let myself get into, partly because of how I was raised. There wasn't that much space for play. There wasn't that much space for spontaneous fun and enjoyment. It was quite a rigid upbringing in many ways. So I'm someone that is very conscious of, I adore play, I adore free play, and I adore depth. And I think of life generally in terms of the yin and the yang of life. And that's what I think of in those two terms of depth and play. On the one hand, it is just very spontaneous and joyful and exciting. And on the other hand, it's conversations that you can get into with people where you can really sink into truth. And truth being sometimes the darkest, most painful elements of who you are and your experience as a human being. Can we go there? We don't have to go there all the time, and I don't think we should. But do we have the capacity to go there? Can I hold myself in that space? Can you hold yourself in that space? Can we hold each other in that space of deep trust, deep awareness, and deep acceptance that to be human is to be fractured, is to be cracked, is to be broken, and can we love each other regardless? That's who I am, and that's what I've been seeking for a long time, is that acceptance of myself, that we don't need to lead with our job title or our degrees or our accomplishments. Like, can we not just put that forward as this, oh, here you go, this is who I am? It's like, no, it's not. Those are things you've done. Those are things you've committed time to. I would say those are examples of your persistence. Those are examples of your interests, but they're not who you are. So, I very much am kind of committed to, at this point, encouraging myself and other people to kind of open up about those things. And I run we're trying to get it more frequently, but right now it's a quarterly event with a really close friend of mine. It's called Open Spaces. And she's been through an extremely, extremely difficult, hellish past year/18 months. My past 18 months has been very difficult. Long relationship breakup, father dying, my last grandparent dying, changes in professional things, business stress, a lot of business stress. And her and I connected over having conversations about some of those things. And I realized very quickly with her and with other very close friends of mine that the conversation wants to go there. And now I know that they can. Now I know that I can trust that person and they can trust me. And we can have those conversations. And ultimately the Open Spaces events is an effort on our part to encourage and extrapolate this idea that we can have these conversations, that we can go through very challenging and very difficult things, and we can feel like sometimes we're not going to get back up again. But that makes you human, and it connects us as human beings to know that about each other. And, I think it's everything. It's everything. I speak to so many. A lot of my work now is with sort of CEOs and business professionals, founders, etc. And the cultural narrative that we need to be perfect, that we need to be infallible, that we need to have everything figured out, no one does. I speak to business professionals, I speak to athletes, I speak to, just in conversation, not just in work. No one has everything figured out. Very few people have even 50% of things figured out. We're all just muddling through life. And if we could also accept that about each other and about ourselves, we'd be a lot more compassionate and loving towards each other. And we'd have a lot more time and patience for the conversations that need to be had and to hold each other ultimately in that fragility, I suppose.
As you've been working with the individuals you just mentioned, CEOs, COOs, athletes, do you notice a common source of their stress, or when they come to you, even if the story is a little bit different, do you notice a common theme between them all?
It's the thing that drives them, but also the thing that causes the most pain, which is, when will I be enough? When will I be enough as a human being, as a person? Do I have to achieve? Do I have to exit? Do I have to get the $50 million exit or the $10 million exit? Do I have to get the promotion? Do I have to get the, whatever it might be? Will I then be enough as a person, as a father, as a mother, as a husband, as a wife, as a whatever it might be? Is that it? Am I okay then? And ultimately, I think it comes back to, I'm not saying specific for those people, but I think generally, in terms of a psychological sense of things, it comes back to the inner child. And all the inner child ever really wants is to be accepted and to be held. So there is a general sense there that, I'll be accepted and held when I've achieved these things. And that's just not how love works. One has to come before the other. You don't achieve the things and then receive it. You receive it and then you achieve it. And realize that actually my receipt of love is not dependent on my achievement of these things. I have the love regardless. And I need to cultivate that and continue cultivating that. It's not something that ever reaches an end. It's an ongoing process. So, and that, ultimately gives us the energy, gives us the vitality, gives us the persistence to keep doing the work, because we know that it's not dependent, our result is not dependent on whether we receive love, compassion, affection, and closeness. So we can give ourselves that through, yes, fostering connections, through fostering connection with the self, through things like breathwork, etc. We can achieve that level of safety within the nervous system and within our closer communities. Because it's the old kind of cliche, right? It's like the business professional who has spent their life working and has achieved all of the things that they wanted to achieve, has got the $50-100 million exit, all of this kind of stuff, but they're completely disconnected from their spouse. They're completely disconnected from their children. And I think it was, Steve Jobs on his deathbed that said he just wished he'd worked less. It's like, well, it's all of that I think culturally we are in the middle of this deep cognitive distortion. And I think the most pervasive cognitive distortion, there are many of them, but I think the most pervasive and insidious of those is kind of black and white thinking, is that all or nothing thinking. That I cannot have that until I have achieved that. That I can't have the level of love, connection, and presence with my family until I know that we never ever have to worry about money ever again. Well, in order to reach that point, you forego so much of the connection, time, and bonding of trust that you need. So I think ultimately that is the biggest thing, which is difficult because, look, particularly in the Western world, there is a scarcity mindset that just seeps through. That, all the adverts on TV for all the cars and all of the lines of credit and all of these kind of things pointing you in the direction of, no, you will never be enough until you own and possess all of the things that we're asking you and telling you that you need to own and possess. So that is the narrative that we are raised on, 100%. That's the narrative that makes social media so impossibly damaging, particularly to youth, but to people in general, is there is always more to aspire to, and you are never enough. That ultimately the system is, the whole success of the system is based around comparison. And I think that's extremely damaging for connection, first and foremost with ourselves, but with each other. If in any given moment the phone is on the table, and even if it's turned upside down, we know now that attention is divided 100%. Even if the phone is turned upside down, even if the phone is turned off, dopaminergic system is still geared towards wondering if we've had a notification, even when the phone is off. The average number of notifications that we get through from a phone now is over 200 in a day. And if you assume that the average length of time of sleep is 7 hours, that equates to one notification every 5 minutes. And that's the average. So we talk about connection in this, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote Coddling of the American Mind. He also wrote The Righteous Mind. His newest book is called The Anxious Generation. And it's a wonderful book. It's also a terrifying book because he really gets into all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, he calls out the kind of 4 main reasons why social media is so damaging. And the first one is sleep deprivation. We know now that any kind of sort of social media usage and kind of general phone usage between the hours, I think it's 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., like has a hugely detrimental effect on not only sleep quality, but massive increases in potential for depression, all of those kind of things as well. But from a connection perspective, yes, if that phone is always there, and obviously we have Apple Watches now, or whatever watch it is, most digital watches connected to phones now, we get notifications buzzing up on them. And the only thing that you really communicate when you are willing to allow your kind of attention to be diverted in that sense is that the person you are currently speaking to is less important than a notification that may come up on your phone. And I think we like to try and ignore that. We like to try and deny that that's the truth. But that is always going to be subconsciously the message that you're communicating. So his first piece is sleep deprivation. So obviously sleep is enormous for mental health, etc. And then you've got social deprivation, you know, off the back of excessive social media use. And then there's addiction is one of them. And there was a fourth one, which was basically your ability to focus for prolonged periods of time. So those 4 things, sleep deprivation, social deprivation, ability to focus for longer periods, and addiction are the 4 kind of main reasons why in his data, and there's a lot of data in the book, that, you know, since 2011, when the first self-facing camera came in, I think the same year that Facebook bought Instagram, those 2 things just kind of lined up, just the increase, and we're talking like over 150, 180% increase in self-harm, in suicidal ideation, in depression, in anxiety, in stress. You know, all of these markers just going through the roof because of this digital technology that is ultimately taking us out of our, you know, rightful connections as human beings.
Back in 2021, the CDC released a report that of people between the age of 10 and 24, there's something around 6,600 that had taken their own life. And when I looked up that number for the first time, it was astonishing to me, particularly because of the age group. It's just too young to think that 6,000, you know, young men and women lost their lives because of that. Something that I wanted to ask you about is 1 week ago, I was listening to an interview that a Secret Service agent gave, and I jotted down something specifically that I wanted to ask you. And it's funny because I'm on this fence where I'm like, is there a higher power that's leading us, or is it all just coincidence? I don't know. For the purposes of this conversation, it doesn't matter. But, you know, for the audience's sake, I didn't know what your answer was going to be when I asked you the common theme between everyone that you coach, and that feeling of not wanting to be enough. But one of the things that the Secret Service agent said was that someone asked her, like, what's the magic thing, or what do I need to do to become you? And her response was, there is no secret. The change you want is all the little things that you do. It's like a sheet of paper, right? One sheet has no weight. You can't put a lot of information on here. The sheet of paper is almost relatively irrelevant. But if you stack a second one on top of it and a third one on top of it, and you get to 1,000 pieces of paper, you have weight. And then you have something to work with. And so if you take 1,000 actions, that's what's going to lead to sovereignty. And if your goal is, I need someone else to complete me, then you're done. The trick is to learn to be good as you are, and then you'll become a magnet to the people that you want in your life. So they asked her a follow-up question and said, how do you become sovereign, Lynn? And her 6 pieces of advice were: stop chasing things and chasing people, stop looking for external approval, stop trying to please people, trust yourself, stop taking inventory from other people by asking their opinion about you, and learn to take rejection as a building block to your resilience. What do you think about all that?
Ooh, it's good. The rejection piece is huge, I think, because, you know, in anything difficult, like trying to achieve anything that's difficult to do, rejection is just baked into that process. So I think rejection being the constant, how do you reframe your relationship with rejection? So, you know, one reframe potentially would be, okay, well, that person hasn't agreed to hear my pitch deck or whatever. Okay, well, then I'm closer to the next person that will. So I think that approach to rejection is very, very important. And also the idea around rejection being that rejection can only be painful if we're perceiving that we are of deficit because of that rejection. And if you take it from a growth-minded perspective, and in that rejection, I don't even like the word, but let's use it. Rejection is an opportunity for me to get data points with which to either discard because they don't fit into my kind of path forward or my intuition, or to take on and kind of integrate as points to move forward and points to grow. So I think framing rejection in that way is extremely important. We only get into trouble with rejection when we take it personally. And it's a very difficult thing not to do. I think a lot of the things I've probably said today are much easier said than done. But that's the work, right? It's to have those moments where we notice ourselves taking those things personally and ask ourselves the question, ultimately a very basic question of, is that true? Or does that need to be true? I think that's a really important question with any of these kind of things. Does that need to be true? And if not, then how can I use this? I'm blanking on the other things that she said now, but I think that was a really key piece of it. What were some of the other things that she said?
It's let you read it because that might help you.
Let's have a look.
6 at the top.
6 at the top. Okay. Stop chasing things and chasing people. 100%. Stop looking for external approval. That one is an interesting one because I think, yes, we're social beings. So ultimately we need some kind of bearing on how we're kind of showing up within our tribe. So I think, yes, not looking necessarily for external validation. We need to be able to validate ourselves based on information that we have that is based on our intuition, based on kind of truth, etc. But I think we also, to caveat that, I also think we need to be willing to receive feedback from people that we trust and that we love and that we care about. I think that's extremely important. I think that's a big piece. Yes, that's separate from kind of constantly seeking external approval. Sure. Stop trying to people please, for sure. Trust yourself. Stop taking inventory from other people, asking their opinion about you. I think that one is interesting because it's, who are you asking? Are you asking people who you kind of just sort of you don't really know, or are you asking the people that genuinely have your best interests at heart? Because the people that have your best interests at heart, that really truly care about you, are not always going to tell you things that you want to hear. And I think that's really important, especially in the kind of social media age, etc. We're very comfortable receiving kind of glow up feedback from people that we barely know, but how are we when we're actually faced with, you know what, this didn't feel resonant to you, this felt disconnected from who you are, and receiving that kind of feedback and being able to have the conversation of, well, I actually disagree. Okay, well then why? Okay, interesting. Well, then how I said it wasn't how I intended to say it. How is it heard to you? Opening up that dialogue of feedback, and really having that, I think, is extremely important. Trust yourself is a really interesting one. I think I come back to intuition whenever I hear the word. It's kind of sort of trust and self and things like that. And I think ultimately intuition is one of these things that gets proven with usage. I think to think that intuition is always going to be correct, I think is false. But it's definitely going to get more reliably correct the more you use it. I think going against your intuition is only ever going to create confusion. So I'll say that again. I think it's a really important point to remember, that your intuition is never going to be 100% right, but it's going to get more right the more that you use it. And, I think that for me has been something that, I've been through periods of my life where I've ignored my intuition. I think we probably all have. And I think that's the worst thing you can do with intuition. Even if you use your intuition, it turns out to be a dreadful error. It's like, okay, well, I can put it down to, I'm a human being and I make dreadful errors sometimes. It's like, okay, right. But again, the probability that it will be more accurate in future the more you use it is I think, feels true to me.
There's something that you jotted down that I wanted to ask you about before we end tonight, and it is that you would like us to be more connected to our souls. And we may have been talking about this the entire episode so far in a way. When I think of soul, I was raised in a Christian home, so my thought immediately goes to like this thing that when my body dies, it's going to either go up to heaven or down to hell. I'm not in that camp anymore. But when I read, when you jotted that down, it got me thinking of like, how do I define the soul? What do I think of that? Because I've now been for about 16 years since I left the church thinking about like, is there life after death? Could we be living several parallel lives right now? Do we get born again into some sort of next version where I think that's almost subscribing to like Buddhism, where you sort of have, after you die, you get to see what you did right in life, what you didn't do right, and then you're born again to have another life where you can try to capitalize on what you learned in the prior life. So I guess my question for you is sort of two parts. How do you define the soul, and how do you get more connected to it?
Love that question. It's a great question. How do I define the soul, and how do I get more connected to it?
Yes.
So first piece, how do I define the soul? I certainly didn't. I will 100% delegate to people like Carl Jung, psychologist, who I adore a lot of his work. And he got this idea from, I'm pretty sure it was Plato. And it's the idea of something called the daemon. It can be spelled two ways, D-A-I-M-O-N or D-A-E-M-O-N. And in ancient Greece, it was basically seen as, the other phrase for it was the soul's whisper. And the daemon was, how we see it now, is basically your intuition. And there's a lot of kind of, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, then there's a lot of connection there with the word demon, which the Christian church took the daemon to create something negative out of it because they didn't want people thinking for themselves. A lot of stuff there.
That's another hour long.
Yeah, there you go, for sure. But the daemon ultimately, originally, was this sense of if any person can slow down into stillness for long enough and actually listen to what the soul has to whisper to you, then you can follow your own path. And that's why it was very, very clear that it was the soul's whisper, this daemon, because it's quiet. It's not the thing that's going to shout at you and it's going to bang on the frying pan to get your attention. It's the thing that needs you to slow down enough to actually question your decisions, to actually kind of audit where you are, and actually, am I doing the things that really deeply turn me on? Am I really kind of doing the things that energize me and excite me and give me the sense that I'm making an impact? Where can my impact be? Doesn't mean to say that impact has to be millions of people it can be depth and also breadth. I remember reading a beautiful book by a guy called Charles Eisenstein, and the book is called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And he talks about it in the sense of one of the biggest kind of challenges that people come up against in terms of the idea of impact is the thought that you have to, again, change the world, that you have to change the whole world, that you have to impact millions of people. So no, start at home. Start within your most local community, within your family, within your friendship group, and let the ripple effect of that, of your impact, of your heart, of your love, of your commitment to that, ripple out as firmly as it possibly can in the most positive of ways. Start with your friendship group, start with your family, and just start there and watch the ripple just expand. So coming back to the idea of soul, that's very much what I think of when I think of soul, is when someone is really connected to their soul, they are connected to their, ultimately their mission, the things that really deeply matter to them and thus can matter to other people. And I think that comes through a lot of trial and error. It comes through a lot of potential pain. You know, a lot of people's soul work comes from the really awfully painful, difficult, challenging moments that they've been through in their lives. And some of the most awe-inspiring people that I know are the people that have alchemized that pain into deep impact and courage and strength and trust, and they're going to use it. And God, it gets me. There is nothing braver in this world than seeing people go through those things and just knowing that they're going to use it to help other people. Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's such an incredible thing to witness. And that's what I think of when I think of soul work and really tapping into the soul is, wow, there is something in that person that is just driven to follow their heart. And there's some beautiful myths that have come up over time, and I think it can be really fun to look at the archetypes in some of those myths. It was oh God, I can't remember exactly who it was now, but it's one of the ancient Greek myths, and it was whoever it was, I can't remember his name. It was a guy. Was going through the labyrinth, and at the end of the labyrinth he was to save someone from the Minotaur, or he was to battle the Minotaur or something like that. And he was given a golden thread so that he'd know how to get back out of the maze after the battle. And so it's kind of pulling on this golden thread. And that's what I think about now when I think about the soul is, and it's a question I ask clients quite often, is what are the elements of the golden thread that you know are there but you're not currently pulling on? Because there are going to be multiple strings of golden thread in your life, the things that really kind of switch you on and connect you to this feeling of deep alignment and resonance with who you are as a human being and with your community around you. And it is ultimately our job in what Carl Jung refers to as this process of individuation, where we're becoming ourselves, to pull on those golden threads, to pull on those things that ultimately lead you to greater impact, to greater inspiration, to greater vitality. It's to pulling on those things. And the real kind of crux of that is that it's not going to be easy. And that's how you prove that it is a golden thread, because you have to go through a lot of shit to keep pulling on it. And it is when you're going through those difficult moments that you know it is the soul, because you're driven to keep going. So in terms of how I see the soul, I see it very much in terms of that soul's whisper, because I see a lot of the benefit of things like meditation and breath work and certain psychedelic therapies and therapy itself, nature, all of those kind of things allow us to slow down into stillness. And it's in that stillness that we really see and feel the truth of who we're becoming and who we are. And I think that's what I see as being the soul. And how to get into the soul, I guess, find more stillness, find more self-trust, self-honesty, and use the intuition more to kind of as I said, to increase the probability that it will be right, and also to notice and call yourself out on where you haven't listened to your intuition, where you've maybe ignored it or gone against it.
I forget when I met you how I pitched the podcast, but when I'm reaching out to someone on either LinkedIn or Instagram and they have no idea who I am and I have no idea who they are, the message is, hey, my name's David and I host an Austin-based podcast where we tell stories around business, fitness, and culture with an aim that by the end of this episode, the internal fire within the audience will be burning a little bit brighter. And part of the reason I put this candle here is because when I first started the podcast, I think that Thad was getting some anxiety over the stranger in the room and he would start farting.
Where has he gone?
Well, now he's just hiding under that blanket. The anxiety's gone. Now that we've had 80 strangers over, 80 friends over, the farting has stopped. But
so relatable, Thad. So relatable.
But the other reason I kept it here is because 20, 30 episodes in, I realized that my target audience is the person that you just described. I have this delusional dream that someone hit play on today's episode, on Alex's episode, and they were just at the darkest point of their life. And through this 90-minute conversation, we were able to give them some tools that acted as a candle. It's not a burning flame, but it gave them just enough to say, I'm going to start pulling on those golden threads. We gave them just enough information and hope and storytelling that it was a turning point for them where they started to think a little bit differently, act a little bit differently, start to seek out some help, listen to other podcasts, read some of the books that we mentioned, but start down their own journey to walking through that fire that forged the weapon on the other side, and to keep going to figure out what are you going to bring to the table, what are you going to bring to your family, to your friends, to your community. And so if you can just keep going through whatever flame it is that you feel is burning you right now, there's that cliche phrase that the hottest fires forge the sharpest weapons. So if you can use those tools to get to the other side of whatever you're facing right now today, I believe that your impact on the world is going to be incredible. So, with that being said, we're not necessarily wrapping up, but just for everything that you've said today, for being transparent with your own journey, and for just the really articulate way that you answered all these questions, I'm just so grateful to have you here and to have you share your insights to these questions this afternoon.
I appreciate it. I really do. And you didn't really have to sell the podcast to me at all when we met. It was just, you're very clearly very conscious of just wanting to connect in a very human way. The fact that we're sat in this place together, we're eye to eye, we're close to each other. This is human conversation. This is human connection. Neither of us have our phones out. They're both, wherever they are. I don't know where mine is right now. I think Thad might have carried it off somewhere, but the fact that we don't know that, it's like that feels really good. That feels really nice. And I think, being able to have a conversation and being able for us to be two men who both just cried on a podcast together is beautiful to me. It's everything. I don't know. I try not to hope too much about what people take away, because everybody takes very different things away from conversations, for sure. But I think it means a lot to me, the fact that I could show up and be completely authentic to who I am, and get into feeling that you show up and are completely authentic to who you are. That's all we can ever really hope for, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I have a few closing questions for you, but before we jump into those, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today that we haven't touched on yet?
Goodness me.
And by the way, if it helps answer, I would love to have you back.
100%.
Yeah. So we can always pick this up in a couple of months.
I struggle when I'm put on the spot like that. I'm not very good in those things. I'm sure there are plenty of things that we haven't spoken about that I would like to. Different kind of healing modalities, I think, as well, in our open spaces events. We do an interview with a specific person in every event, someone that's gone through a lot of pain and gone through a lot of very dark times and has come back to this place where they're feeling healed. And so one of the questions we always ask them towards the end of the interviews is, what have been your kind of key healing modalities? What have you done to heal? So I think kind of digging into healing is a very important conversation to have, and everybody does it in very different ways, which is why we like to ask everybody the question. No person's journey is the same. And I think it gives a lot of people a lot of inspiration about, oh, okay, I can take elements of this journey, and kind of create my own. And, you know, over the past, goodness, I suppose I started in mindfulness meditation when I was maybe 13 years ago, I suppose. So that was, I suppose, my first formal kind of introduction to healing modalities, I suppose. But then since then, there's been a lot more that's come in. Breathwork has been one of them. Psychedelic experiences, journeys has been another. So a lot of has come off the back of that. But that's a very kind of wide-ranging, longer conversation. So we'll have to have that another time for sure.
I will, just to give you a laugh. You know, before I left Sacramento, California, Northern California, where I'm from, it was very much an environment, not just in my family, but I think in general, that outside of marijuana, you know, drugs are bad and they will kill you. And so moving out here to Austin, there have been a lot of people who have had some sort of psychedelic experience. And, you know, they've come out on the other side of those with a lot of healing, a lot of things, revelations and thoughts. And, you know, it's been a really positive thing for them. And so last December, I go home for Christmas, and we're all sitting around the Christmas table. And I think someone asked me, like, what are you most looking forward to in 2024? And I said, you know, I don't know if it'll happen in 2024 necessarily, but at some point, you know, I think I'm going to try psychedelics. And the hush that went over the table was just like,
Yeah,
you need to get back to California. Like, Austin it's really ruining you.
having its way with you. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
you're going downhill fast.
Isn't it interesting that was the response? That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, I think it's to me, even myself, you know, I've never really had conversations about drugs. It's not something that's been on top of mind. Even that term, I don't really like using, just like how you had some reservation about using rejection earlier. You know, it's even got me thinking thoughts about, like, did Moses actually see a burning bush?
There you go.
Or was it something else?
Well, and I've also heard reports that the bush was, if I can remember, I think I'm going to get fact checked hard on this one, and that's fine. Was an acacia bush, I think, which is, you know, when it's burned, gives off psychedelic properties. That's what I've heard. Obviously, cannot confirm or nor deny, but
yeah, if you have some you know, source you want to throw at us, that's the nice thing about YouTube in 2024 is you can say whatever you want in the comments, good, bad, or in the middle. Hopefully good, but yeah. You want to plug your app?
Yeah, so Edge Performance is the company. It's called the Edge app. So my business partner and I started it in 2020. Wonderful year to start a business. That's one of those things. So we started it with a view to really give performers, and that is a wide-ranging term for sure, but give people that want to perform, that want to kind of be at their best, routine-based systems for getting into their best kind of mental state. So it involves breath work. We've got gratitude practice in there as well. We've got intention setting. We've got a bit of journaling element in there as well. But the real kind of core of it is this both performance and somatic breath work. That is all built into AM and PM routines to kind of bookend their day. Each routine is a maximum of 10 minutes long, absolute maximum of 10 minutes. So you can get it done relatively quickly, and then there's things you can do during the day as well. So that's been a lot of fun. It's also been a hugely challenging process, just starting a business and persisting with a business and everything that comes along. But yeah, we've been lucky enough to get into a few Major League Baseball teams and universities out on the East Coast, starting to kind of open it up to gyms here in Austin as well. I'm doing some in-person somatic breathwork experiences with some awesome gyms here in Austin as well. So yeah, it's all kind of building together. There's an in-person element. There's obviously the app-based online element as well, just for accessibility purposes. People can take it everywhere they go. And it's, again, like you said, one piece of paper is kind of worth nothing really, but when we stack those pieces of paper on top of one another, you know, we create something that has a lot of weight behind it. So that has been our effort with the app, to really create a system where people could compound that impact of those daily habits very, very easily, very effectively, and over time really notice the difference in their own performance and also just how they're feeling within themselves.
And is the app available to anyone right now?
It is, yes. We're on iOS, Apple Store, and what's the other one? Android.
Okay.
Yeah.
We forget about the Android users.
I know. Can't exclude them.
No. Yeah. So when you said performer, you know, you said it's a wide term. So let me throw a few different categories of people at you and just get a quick yes or no on if you think they should check it out. I have a feeling you're going to say yes to all of them.
Okay.
But what would you say about like a 17-year-old bodybuilder?
Oh, 100%.
An aspiring comedian.
Definitely. Yes.
A 37-year-old
thing.
A 37-year-old podcaster.
100%. Yes.
Someone that's trying to scale $1 billion business.
Absolutely.
A rock band of 4 men in their mid-20s out of New York.
I love that. Every single one of them. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm just looking at who's on this wall, and I'm like, who? You know, you said it's a broad term, but I think all of these people.
Yeah, we all have our performances, right? And that's where I get very careful with the wording there, because I never want it. You know, it's not the truth that we're not all performers. I think we can get a little too much into the I am a performer kind of mentality. Like, can we be human beings as well as human doings kind of thing? But yeah, we all have our performances. Being a parent is a performance, 100%. We want to show up as best we can. And that's ultimately, for me, what defines being a performer is you have something in your life that you want to show up as your highest self for. That is being a performer, ultimately.
I like that definition. Where do you know your Instagram handle?
It's Alex_Easby, so it's EASBY. Yep.
And then I think my last question for you was for open spaces. I know you said you do keep it to a smaller group. Could anyone, quote unquote, anyone go? Do you guys have like an application system? How do you get your foot in the door with an open space event? Yeah,
no application process. We really just kind of rely on inviting in good, kind people that are willing to get a little bit uncomfortable and meet other people, but it's an extremely welcoming environment. And yes, we kind of keep it at around 20 people maximum, because we want it to be like a closed setting. We want people to have good conversations, and once the group grows past that, you kind of having a lot of very kind of micro conversations, and it becomes more difficult. But we're keeping it at 20, but we're very much with a view in the future to open up different locations in different cities, different groups, and have them all over the place. So we could do a South Austin one, a North Austin one, a Central Austin one, and then get down to Dallas, Houston, do all of that, because ultimately that's what we're trying to encourage, is these conversations to be had and these connections to be made. So, yeah.
Those conversations are powerful ones.
100%.
And we need to be having more of them. It's good for us.
100%.
It's healing.
Very.
Yeah.
Very.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it. For everyone that tuned into the episode today, thank you so much for jumping in. And I know that you got many things out of it. I won't say what, because it's going to be personal for every listener. But, please support the show and help us reach those people that we need to reach. Me and Alex showed up today and did our job. My request of you would take 3 to 5 minutes and go leave the podcast a 5-star review on Spotify, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I promise you that if you help us reach more listeners so that we can bring healing to our communities, I will continue to work tirelessly to bring you the great guests like Alex, who are going to deliver messages of hope, healing. We had shared a couple laughs. It was all good. So thank you for doing that. Stay healthy, stay happy, and we will see all of you next Saturday night. Bye, guys.